JK here for the AllStar, and join me right now is featherweight prospect Korean Thunder, Ryan Kim Cafaro. Ryan, thank you so much for the time, man. How you feeling?
I feel great. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be on here and being interviewed by someone else who's Korean. So, I definitely really try to, represent my Korean pride, and I try to rep it real hard.
For sure, man. For sure. We all got to do it, man. We all got to play our part. Let's get into it right away, man. You recently returned from almost 2 years away from the cage and got a good decision win at Art of War 19. Did you feel any ring rust, and how did you feel about the way the fight played out?
So with the fight, I felt there was definitely I didn't feel like there was ring rust in terms of like my actual skill. I think there was ring rust in terms of my trust and my confidence in myself because before I had fought that fight, I had fought for the Ring of Combat title against someone that I had an opponent and then he pulled out and I accepted a new opponent on short notice and I feel like I just underperformed so badly. And after that fight, I was just really kind of like I don't know if I have it anymore, or why can't I pull the trigger? And I had trouble pulling the trigger for a couple fights, which after I lost my first pro title shot against Scott Heckman, I just feel like I had trouble trusting in my skills. And this was the first time in a long time that I really have been putting it together in the gym consistently, and then was able to apply it to the cage in competition. So I feel like in terms of actual skill set rust, no, my reactions were on point, my timing was on point. But in terms of like my trust and like you got this, you can finish this guy, you can beat this guy, it was very it was nerve wracking.
Yeah, watching the fight, it seemed like you built up. The first round, you got your flow, and then the second round a little bit better, and then the third round, you got into more exchanges. Did you feel more confident in like just sticking in the pocket against your opponent?
Yeah, I just felt I've had Asan Abdullah is probably a fighter similar to me, where a lot of people look at his record and they go, he has a decent amount of losses, but I don't feel like a record like that does him justice based on the caliber of people he's fought and based on the caliber of people he's beat. If you look at his record, he's upset some undefeated guys. He's fought Rob Font. He's fought some pretty high caliber fighters and UFC veterans and top contenders. And so I feel like that as the fight went on, I was less and less concerned about him actually being able to hurt me and more excited about like getting into that, just getting into a fight. It didn't feel like I was trying to win on points. It felt like, you want to fight? Well, let's fight. And that really like fired me up and got me going. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed every second of being in that cage for the full 15 minutes.
All right. Now, for yourself, you're the striking coach of many, many notable fighters. But I want to go back. What striking art did you start with?
So I actually started wrestling in high school. That was my first thing ever. And then I found a Tiger Schulman school near my high school, and I started training there. So I actually started well-rounded. I started with wrestling, and then I transitioned into MMA as a whole. So I learned how to grapple. I learned how to kickbox. Albeit it was somewhat basic, but Tiger Schulman's is very good at building a foundation of basics and a well-rounded fighter with grappling, wrestling, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, things of that nature. But then I really got into Muay Thai and boxing through Eugene Hart. His father is Eugene Cyclone Hart, who's a Philadelphia boxing legend, and I really accredit all of my fundamentals in my hands and my boxing to Chip Eugene Hart. And then with my Muay Thai, I worked with my Muay Thai striking coach Wasim Saad, who he was a legend on the Boston Muay Thai scene in like the early '90s, late '90s, maybe early 2000s, something like that. I think that's when he was pretty prominent on the scene there. So if you ask, like the Mark Delagratis and the people like that in that area, they know about Wasim Saad and his style of fighting, which those two combined really helped mold the striker and the striking coach that I am today.
You said you wrestled in high school. Did you start striking in high school? Did you find Tiger Schulman's in high school?
Yeah, my senior year. And I mean, before that, I had seen I had seen David Loiseau fight Evan Tanner, and that was the first UFC fight I ever saw. And I saw that, and I was like, whatever that is, I want to do that. And then yeah, and then so my friends and I would sneak off in during lunch in high school and put on, those like Everlast gel wraps that are not gloves. We would just put those on and just fist fight and be like, yeah, let's figure out how to do this. And we'd like just straight up fight each other. And it's amazing that I still have all my teeth because of no mouth guards back then. We high school kids just fist fighting. So
Yeah, yeah, I remember. I remember when I was in middle school. I'm not a fighter, but in middle school, when you're growing up and playing sports, you get interested, in combat sports instantly because of
yeah,
when I was young, it was Mike Tyson, that was going big at that time, and I remember wrapping socks around my hands with my football teammates, in the off
yeah.
season and just fighting each other in the backyard and then looking at our
Right, because
faces
you figure it out.
afterwards.
You're like, I want to do this. This is cool. Let's try it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, crazy. And
it's a
the reason why I ask you that is because you've been fighting since you were a teenager. I noticed in you started your amateur career as a teenager, and then you went
yep.
on like this long winning streak to end it, and then you made your pro debut at Bellator 108. Now the fight didn't go your way, so tell us what you thought about the fight and how it impacted you moving forward in your career.
I mean, I can sort of attribute that fight to a lot of things. It really reaffirmed that do I want to win or do I want to fight? Like which one? Like is what do I want to do with my life? Because it's very easy to be like, well, I made it pro. I got to fight in Bellator. I'm sure my kids will like this in the long run. But it really, I took a year off after that fight to really, I was working a job at a gym and kind of it took a while to kind of develop the motivation to see if I really wanted to step back in there and get after it. Um, I do attribute that loss to a lot of things. I think a lack of appropriate preparation. I was in college full time at the time. I was working two jobs at two different gyms at the time. All excuses, but I was like, I don't know, I was like 23, 24. I think I'm allowed to make some excuses now. So, and then also, I think I attribute a lot of that to the lack of experience you get from the local PA New Jersey scene, not in the sense that I didn't have enough, not in the sense that I didn't have enough experience, but the rounds are 2-minute rounds in PA and Jersey, and then advanced is 3-minute rounds. And then to transition from that to where you're not allowed to kick the head in any rule set in New Jersey and PA to all of a sudden being allowed to punch, kick, knee, and elbow the head on the feet and elbow the head on the ground. It was just a rude awakening that I was really not prepared for against the caliber of opponent I had at the time, who was Dan Matala, who was also very, very good, who went 1-0, and then we never saw him again.
Yeah, that's a trip, huh? How some fighters they just fight one time as a professional and we never see them again. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
it's crazy. It's happened so much. Now, since then you've had a slew of fights, some solid finishes throughout the career. Which fight was your best performance, do you feel like, so far?
So it'd have to be. It was a streak of 3 fights, and it was I had just it was I had beaten somebody named Al Jones, who was a short notice replacement when I had just lost to Jacob Bond as a featherweight, and I was considering dropping down to bantamweight at the time. So I had a catch weight of 140 at against Al Jones, who I beat, and then as I dropped to 35 for my next fight, I had lost 3 or 4 opponents throughout the camp, and then the fight got canceled at weigh-ins after was on my way to making 35 and had to diet for 8 to 10 weeks, extremely strict. It was miserable. And then I actually herniated a disc in my neck, so I didn't actually get to fight for over a year because I had to rehab. And when I finally came back, I fought an undefeated prospect named Adley Edwards, and he's big on the north. I think he's ranked #1 in the Carolinas, and I think he was slated for the Contender series before he's been injured, and at the time he was 2-0, and I think he's 7-1 now. And to date, it was definitely the peak of my striking performance. I've never been more on point with my striking. And then a fight a month later, I fought for King of the Cage, and I knocked out a guy named Chris Humes Mitchell, who was undefeated at the time. He was 3-0, and I threw an overhand, and I think I broke his orbital and in like 23 seconds in the fight, and that was done. And then after that was the last one, Jared Mercado, who at the time I think I was 5-2, maybe I was 5-2, and Jared Mercado was 14-5, so he had a wealth of experience. Had fought in Japan, had fought everywhere, and it was a big step up in competition. So it was from like the summer until December. I had 3 fights, and I beat him by a ninja choke. And as soon as the bell rang in that fight, I actually sprinted across the cage and flying kneed him in the face. It was like I was doing the Jorge Masvidal before Jorge Masvidal did the Jorge Masvidal. So if I had connected a little bit cleaner, I think I would have the fastest knockout in MMA history. Because I made contact with the knee at 1 second. So if I had landed that and he'd gone out cold, it definitely would be the fastest knockout in MMA history. But I ended up choking him out in the second round. So it was so to answer your question in the beginning, it was a 3-fight streak. It was a guy that was 2-0, 3-0, and then 14-5, back to back in like a 6-month span. So that was like my streak which got me my first pro title shot against Scott Heckman.
You mentioned after your last fight, or not even your last fight, the fight before that, at the end of 2019, that you were contemplating, like, should I move forward? And how was that? How did you get over that hump? You know what I mean? Because everybody goes through those low periods in their career or just in their life period.
So coaching helped. I got to, after that fight, Frankie, Edgar asked me on short notice to go corner him against Chan Sung Jung in Busan, which was really cool. And it's it helps you, not in the sense of like it helps you get over a loss, but it helps you just get your mind off things to let you refocus, in the sense that like you get to do what you love, and even if it's not competing, you get to help people compete at the highest level. And you have to step back and I had to show gratitude for an opportunity like that on short notice. Before that I hadn't been to Korea since I was 10 years old, so it was like a 20-year layoff for me returning to the motherland. So it was really, really cool to return there, especially with Frankie Edgar. Being Frankie Edgar, one of his striking coaches, it's just been such an awesome experience. But honestly, for me, what really saved my willingness to fight again was the pandemic. I was so burnt out, and I had helped so many of my friends who were pro fighters and big names propel themselves to the highest levels of the UFC, that I think for a while I wasn't spending enough time focusing on myself. And I was really bitter about it. I was lifting with my strength and conditioning coach early in 2020, and I just remember my elbows hurting from holding pads and just being miserable. And I was like, what do I have to show for this? I have banged up elbows, and I just lost my 2 title shots as a pro. So, I became very bitter about it. And then when the pandemic hit, I had no responsibilities, and I didn't really move or train for a month straight. And it let me heal a lot of injuries. It let me, miss the sport, because I wanted to get back into it, but I just couldn't find the motivation to get back in. And then I started training aggressively in the basement of my house, because we were all on lockdown at the time. And my girlfriend and we started doing an Airdyne bike workout, which is essentially it's an AKA workout that's really popular, that Khabib's team popularized. And it's something like 30 minutes straight, no rest, of 30 seconds on an Airdyne bike, and then 30 seconds of a bodyweight exercise or bag work or something. So 30 minutes nonstop in that. And doing that has changed how I fight, how I perform as an athlete in general. My endurance has never been better, and I'm a lot wiser and more energy efficient.
Was it the mix then? It seems like it was the mix of having time for yourself, and because I've seen you corner many people throughout the pandemic, so it must have been like finding that balance for yourself, having your time too.
Well, because I literally had nothing else to do. I had to make money, so cornering people in the pandemic became my thing. It became my niche, because I was, not only am I a very competent pad holder, but I'm a competent grappler, a competent wrestler, a competent whatchamacallit. I'm just a great body. I'm like the Swiss Army knife of what you need as a coach, teammate, nutritionist, weight cut specialist, especially when I found a niche coaching women, and working with Sajara Eubanks and Caitlin Chukagian and Claudia Gadelia. That was like my 3 main girls that I was cornering a lot during the pandemic, and feeling very comfortable and they trust me, and we have a phenomenal working relationship. And I mean, it came all the way, it came full circle. Sajara cornered me for my last fight. So we have a really good working relationship there, in the sense that now I feel like I have a team around me, and it's not just like me trying to like ask for tips and things like that. So like when I go to the gym, I corner Sajara when she spars, and then I gear up, and then she corners me when I spar. So we're on such a compatible level that we both have been helping each other improve in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it seems like the next level of coaching nowadays is your style of coaching. Guys or women that have fought, that have competed, and have just that could be in a body like you said during the camp, not just eyes from the side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like while it's not necessarily the requirement, I do feel like in the pandemic, if you have somebody who can do everything, it's very, very valuable. And the value of a coach who can do everything went up massively during the pandemic, because people who were normally bringing a striking coach, a grappling coach, and a wrestling coach or something like that, something along those lines, where they have like the head coach, the striking coach, and the grappling coach. Because of the pandemic and requirements, sometimes they're like, you can only have two cornermen. In Singapore, they only let Eddie Alvarez have one cornerman. So I had to go to Singapore with Eddie, and he couldn't take Mark Henry or Ricardo Almeida, and I had to be the grappler, be the striking coach, help him weight cut and all that, and help him pick foods to eat and things when we ordered food and so on and so forth. So the pandemic has really hammered out a niche for people like me, who can coach, who can fight, who can spar, and do it all. And it's kind of, a lot of people got really financially ruined and messed up and depressed because of the pandemic. And to be completely honest, the pandemic was one of the best things to ever happen to my fighting career, and the best thing to happen to my coaching career.
Definitely. Now let's talk about the fight coming up. Less than 3 month turnaround. You're taking on Matthew Skibicki. Hopefully I'm saying it right. Stellar Fight 47. What is your breakdown of your opponent, and how do you see yourself stacking up against him?
So first off, if the first thing that stood out to me as a major red flag right across, right off the rip, was the fact that he's 4-4 on a 4-fight losing streak. And I was almost shocked and like borderline insulted that he actually accepted the fight with me, because I'm 8-5, and if you look at his record, he's fought, and I believe he's only beat people with losing records. Now, he's fought some tough people, but once he lost his first fight, he just went on a skid, and he's been finished 3 times in a row, 2 times with chokes, 1 time a TKO. And so for somebody who's been finished with 2 chokes to fight somebody like me, who is a natural 45, where I believe he came up from 35, and he wants to fight me, and I'm a choke specialist. I guillotine a lot of people throughout. I think I've guillotined 7 or 8 people between my amateur and pro career. So for him to want to come up and fight me on the streak that he's on, one of 2 things is going on. I'm either extremely insulted at the fact that this guy is just showing up for a paycheck, or he's really fighting the toughest people he can find and is just getting the short end of the stick, and his back is against the wall, and I expect him to be more dangerous than ever, because, if I were him, I would exhaust every resource possible to avoid going 0-5 in a row. That's just me. When I lost fights, I threw the kitchen sink. I hired mental coaches. I switched up nutrition. I did everything to ensure I will not lose again. And, it works out sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. But I exhausted every option, because this is the only thing that I really am passionate about and want to do.
I see that you have Kevin Chung, who is also fighting on the same night in training camp with you. What has the grind been like with him?
So Kevin Chung and I became friends on social media probably, mid 2015, something like that. And we've always been talking and considering training with each other, but timing never worked out. He lives in Virginia, and then he was fighting a 1 championship, and then he had a slew of injuries and a long layoff from fighting. And then after the pandemic, I told him to, maybe if you want to come train, we should come train. And he came down to visit for a weekend, and we exchanged some tips and some training back and forth. And we have a really good ebb and flow of how we train. And I feel like I provide a lot of really beneficial aspects to his training that he normally didn't have. And I mean, As far as I'm concerned, Kevin made it to one championship and made it to 5-0 without a real team, from what he's told me. Essentially, working with jiu-jitsu guys that are putting on MMA gloves. And, I bringing him down here, I got to expose him to, Ricardo Almeida, BJJ. He got roles in with Frankie, Edgar, Cody Garbrandt. And, people like working with him. And he's clearly, in my opinion, he's definitely a top caliber fighter, and a couple wins on the board. And as far as I'm concerned, he's right back in the Contender series and right back to where he belongs based on a fighter of his caliber. I think he's really, really good. And I think he still has a lot left in the tank, being that he's only, 27, 28, something like that. So I feel like I made adjustments with him in terms of how he should be living as an athlete, how he should be treating his body inside of camp, outside of camp, how he should be preparing for these fights. And I feel like his confidence is at an all-time high, and I'm really looking forward to him just blowing the doors off this kid that he fights.
Completely agree. Now, what's your prediction? How do you feel like you're going to take this dude out?
I'm going to feel him out early, and if he has nothing to offer me, I'm just going to blow right through him in the first 2 minutes. I just feel like everywhere he's good, I'm better. It's a little cliche, but from a standpoint of he seems like he's a bit of a choke specialist. He likes guillotines and things like that. But I'm one of the best in the world with a guillotine. I'm very confident in that. And he likes to strike and he likes to kick, and I'm definitely one of the best kickers around on the regional circuit right now. So, and I think my hands are better than his. So I really do feel like, as far as everything goes with my skill set, I'm just a level above him. And if he shows even an inch or an ounce of quit, I'm going to expose it ruthlessly, aggressively, and early. And fighting Hassan Abdullah was rough. It was brutal. We went back and forth. He tested my chin multiple times, and I had trouble walking after that fight. It was a painful fight. It was a well-earned victory. And to be honest, I don't feel like fighting 3 rounds. I want to get this done in 1.
All right. Now, what's the plans for the rest of the year after Stellar Fight 47?
I have a lot of options, and it was pretty interesting that I could not find a fight for like a year. Busy because of the pandemic, with coaching, and then I'd be offered fights that I couldn't take, or they'd be like, "Hey, do you want to fight blah 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 Magomedov, who's 22-0?" And I'd be like, "Not really." You have to be strategic at some point. If you say I'll fight anyone, anywhere, at any time, you're gonna have a bad record realistically, unless you are a John Jones or something like that. But those fighters are few and far in between. You still have to be intelligent with your matchups. I mean, even John Jones turned down Chael Sonnen on a couple days' notice. So, what was I saying? So then, yeah.
Options.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So I have a lot of options for the end of the year. I'm being offered fights on the regional circuit from a lot of different promotions. And it really all depends on what's going to happen with this fight and how I perform. And I think if I put my predictions to fruition and I smoke him quickly, maybe I'll get a call up to the Contender series. Maybe I'd be willing to step in on short notice on a UFC card, because I do know people that are pretty close to Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, and it's not ideal in the sense that I don't want to get into the UFC just based on who I know, but I do feel like with strong performances back to back against, and if you look at my resume and my credentials, and I think the combined record of all the opponents I fought is something like 80 something and 40 something. So it's a very, very strong record against the caliber of opponents I fought and beat. So I would not be surprised if I have to take another regional fight or two. I think that I could easily get into the UFC at a record of 10-5, which I would like to have by the end of the year. And if not, then I'd be ready to step up after this fight, assuming everything goes off without a hitch.
What about on the coaching side?
On the coaching side, so this is the first time since I've been starting to corner Sajara Eubanks coming up. She fights next week on the same day I do, and it's the first time that we haven't been able to corner each other since. So it's kind of a bummer in that sense, but I feel like Sarge is going to blow through her opponent. She feels like I'm going to blow through my opponent. So we sort of made a mutual agreement, like, you whoop yours, I'll whoop mine, fist bump, and then let's keep it moving. But it really depends. Like my main killers right now, I'm working with, Frankie, Edgar, Sajara Eubanks, Caitlin Chukagian, and so when they call, I answer. So it really depends on their schedule. I'll be helping Frankie get ready for his fight in November at Madison Square Garden. I'm also helping Cody Garbrandt get ready. Cody Garbrandt coming into town has elevated my level of training and my level of especially sparring to a place that I wasn't really sure I was capable of. But when you spar with somebody like Cody Garbrandt, who is, in my opinion, the fastest fighter on the UFC roster, you have to rise to that level in order to be competitive. And after sparring Cody, sparring anyone else looks like you're fighting someone in slow motion. It's laughable. Like there have been times where I've blinked and I've missed a punch or a kick that Cody has thrown. That's how fast he is. So it really, to answer your question, what really, on the coaching standpoint, it really depends on who's up.
You mentioned Cody and his speed. Frankie's pretty damn fast too himself.
Yeah, and I mean Frankie's so fast, and he's such a ruthless, aggressive veteran. Who Frankie is one of those guys that if you let him get the ball rolling, you are screwed. Like if he gets on top of you and you cannot shake him or you cannot get him off you and he starts getting his ground and pound going, he can stop anybody in the world from the top position. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do against Marlon Vera, because I don't think Marlon Vera can stop his takedowns for 3 rounds. And I think Frankie's so crafty about getting people to the ground. And if he gets Marlon there, he's going to stop him.
What do you think about Cody and at flyweight? Do you think he'll be able to carry that speed down to flyweight?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Like I said, regardless of weight class, I think he's the fastest fighter on the roster and possibly, I don't know, top 3 MMA fighters on the planet in terms of speed. Maybe number 1. I mean, have you seen anyone faster?
No, it's arguable, no, right? That he is the fastest.
Like, maybe you could argue Mighty Mouse in his prime, but like if we talk in terms of raw hand speed and raw foot speed, Cody's the fastest, bar none. No comparison.
So how do you see him performing against Kai Kara France, another guy that actually came from 135 down to 125 to fight in the UFC? The speed is going to be the difference maker, you think?
Absolutely. I think the speed will be the difference maker. I think Cody walks around sometimes close to 135. It seems like he walks around like in the low 40s. High 30s sometimes, which is insane to me that, he won the title walking that light. When you see guys like Max Holloway putting on almost 30 pounds overnight, you see Davidson Figueiredo putting on what appears to be 30 pounds overnight at flyweight, which is bananas because that's like, I don't know, half his torso in body weight or something like that. So it's pretty crazy. What's really cool about the camp with Cody and Frankie is that those two in particular, they transcend weight classes based on their skills and based on their talents. Frankie won the belt at 55, walking around at 55 against guys 20, 30 pounds bigger than him. Cody won the belt at 35 and has knocked guys out way bigger than him and has done it with his technique and his speed and his power.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see how he does at 125 and very interested to see Frankie Edgar return and MSG. I think that's his dream, and it's going to be an incredible fight. Man, you got your fight coming up. The team is rolling. October 16th, Stellar Fight 47. Ryan, it was an incredible chat, man. I hope to do many of these in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to it. We'll definitely we'll set one up for after I win this one, and we'll keep it moving.